Welcome to Underdog Rising with your host, Wade Posehn, where we ignite your journey from humble beginnings to greatness through inspiring tales of top executives and entrepreneurs. Welcome, everybody, to Underdog Rising. Today, we have Kevin Riedl with us. He's the managing partner at Wayfact. Kevin, thank you for being with us, and we're excited to talk through this with you.
Yeah, thanks, Wade, for the invite. Looking forward to your questions.
So, Kevin, could you just give a little bit of background on yourself, from where you started throughout college, after college, until this point where you are today?
Sure. I mean, my path was everything but linear, to be honest. I don't want to start too early, but I basically started at a very young age coding, creating websites, tried to just pack tons of features on that website. And at some point, I started looking into bleeding edge technologies, from quantum computers to smart city IoT to blockchain, of course, which I'm stuck with now, and all sorts of other things. And during that time, I, of course, slipped into the startup world, which was kind of around my second year at college. That was when I joined a blockchain startup, which technically still exists. And at the same time, stupid as I was, I founded my own social tech startup. So I had two companies at the same time, which is madness, doesn't make sense, and always fails. And that went for 2 years. And after that, I basically, I would even dare to say burned out, because I wasn't able to. Also, I killed the startup. Let's put it that way. Corona happened at the same time. That's when everything closed down, and I basically had for a full month no job, nothing. And that was the first time in my life I had nothing to do, had no energy, and I couldn't even grasp my get my remote control to watch a series. Like, I lay in my bed and was like, "Oh man, the remote control is really not sure, so far away, like 1 or 2 meters." I my heart started pumping just because of that. I had like blood pressure of what was it, like way too high for my age. I think it was like 140, 150. Also the upper one, and yeah, like just super unhealthy and had a lot of other side effects. And 1 month later, I started my first actual non-employed, also like employed job position as software developer. And then a few months later, I started again building some crazy stuff. And yeah, then basically 1 year later, after quitting twice on the same job, when my boss tried to convince me to stay, I just couldn't handle it anymore. I quit, had no cash flow, nothing like that. I just didn't want to do it anymore, which is stupid. And then I basically just had to make my way with freelancing and other stuff. And that resulted in what I have today with my agency business.
I'd like to ask you, what did you do, or how did you go from being on the couch, not wanting to get up and grab the remote, which was a few meters in front of you, to getting back into working?
Just to give you a clearer picture, up until that point, that was the most productive time of my life. That the prior 2 years, I was like working literally, like not exaggerating here, like every 3 minutes. Like when I had a call and had like 5 minutes spare, I answered like two emails or did whatever, like bam, bam, bam. From I think every entrepreneur knows that phase, but it was like over 2 years nonstop, and a lot of things went wrong all the time because I was super inexperienced. And then just imagine Corona, like you don't have to work, your startup dies, bam, full break from 120 miles per hour to zero, and you suddenly question everything, like what did I do right? Especially because I had an impact startup. So I was like really impact driven at that time as well. And then I suddenly had nothing. Like my purpose was gone, and I just was so stressed. I even lost a little bit of hair, which is crazy because I have way too much, right? So it really was that was basically how it came to that. And after a month, I just had to start to work again because I had a new job, right? So I, of course, it wasn't at that stage where I was like, okay, I have to go to work, but I can't even show up. Right? So it wasn't at that stage. So I was still able to, if I have to show up somewhere, I was showing up. But that was all and that basically got me back, right? Because out of purpose, or like an empty life is pushing through, right? Like with sport, with work, with something to do. That's, I think, always the solution. You just need something that pushes you.
Yeah, I agree. A body in motion stays in motion, right? A body at rest stays at rest. And I think that to that point, that supports that. But now that you've gone through that and you look back for listeners today, like, do you have any advice on how to balance time so that they don't fall into the situation that you perhaps fell into back then?
It's part of the usual entrepreneur's journey, I think, or anyone who wants to do something special. Because in the end, I love this saying from Jordan Peterson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, where he says like you need to figure out what you're capable of, like how hard can you work, right? And once you figure out like how hard you can work, then back down a little bit. That's kind of just don't overdo it. I really forced myself for 2 years, even though I knew my limits. I just disregarded them. I just said, "Fuck it, let's do it anyway. I have to," and that made me, of course, like I had no resilience anymore because every tiny thing that was unexpected made me overwhelmed, and that's you're just reacting to everything. That's the worst position to be in. Just avoid that.
Managing time it's something important to learn. Like, yes, give it your all, as you said, like you're really striving to achieve your goals, give it everything you have, but also identify when there's those times that you do maybe need to take a break and recharge. Otherwise you will have that burnout. And then something else I wanted to dive into was, you've done bodybuilding and calisthenics training throughout your life. Like, has anything from those workouts helped you within business? And do you mind explaining that a little bit?
In general, sport always helps, right? It gives you something to channel your negativity, your pressure, your all these things, and it's also proven, right, from a health and well-being perspective that it makes you more productive. Even though when I do any kind of sport, if you are active, you still, despite spending time on it, get much more done on that day because you're just more focused, more driven, more clear in your mind what matters.
Yeah, I agree with you there, right? I think even though you're taking that, whatever it might be, 20 minutes to an hour to actually work out, if, longer for some people, I think that there is that extra sense of clarity. I think the focus increases and you're able to spend more time in the flow of work to really get into what you're doing quicker than if you had sort of brain fog because you didn't take that time to work out. So, yeah, that mind body connection there is really important. And, it doesn't have to be a lot. This day and age, people think, oh, I got to be in the gym for, over an hour. But if you're just moving 20 minutes a day or you're making sure that you're taking walks, like it varies for different people. So I think people have to also understand that. Do what you can where you can, but it definitely does help with, the trajectory and what you're moving into. So, you spoke about channeling negativity, right? And that's within working out. Are there any other mental mindset tips that you might have for the listeners today to continue moving forward in whatever it might be that they're doing?
I'm not sure if I'm in the position to give people tips or recommendation on mindset, because I don't know if that's something that brought me to where I am today. I'm not like crazy successful like some people are, but I would say also that there are two. It's two sided, right? For me, for a long time, all my goals were based on insecurity, right? Because oftentimes when you want to achieve something, you want to earn a certain number, also get to a certain number of wealth, you want to get a six pack, you want to XYZ. It's always because of some kind of pain, insecurity, whatever, if you ask often enough, right? And once at some point in your life, when you achieved a couple of these goals, whatever these are for you, you lose that, right? You're not driven by insecurity anymore. That's something that I really struggled with in the last 3 years, because I'm a really simple guy. I never was interested actually in earning money. Like just at some point when that was my insecurity, like, okay, why are these people earning more than me? At some point it comes to trying to challenge yourself and just making yourself feel good. And I discovered for myself, and I like the approach from Alex Hormozy here a little bit, where he says hard work is the goal. And it took me some time to truly understand that. But if you just work hard, the productive days are the best days. Those are the cool days where you feel like, okay, it was exhausting, but it was the good way of exhausting, right? It was like, fuck yeah, I want to have every day like that. And, you know, that's the goal, right? You want to have a cool life, and everything else, the outcome. And that also, like, if you look at it, all the super successful people say the person that loves walking walks further than the person that just, wants to get there or something like that. So there are tons of people that say a very similar thing, and it's in the end that stupid saying, it's about the process, which means working hard, feeling good, enjoying somewhat yourself, although there's a lot of shit that happens all the time. And I think that's the only or the best thing, also the thing that really helps me to keep that perspective.
Getting to the end goal is great, but then it also comes down to once you get there, then what? You've accomplished it. So now there's nothing more. But if you really learn to enjoy working through that process, whether it's good or it's bad or it's ugly, and just going through it, then I feel like that's when the true success will come through, right? Because you're now not doing it for anything monetary, even though at the beginning it might start out that way, but then you're doing what you love to do. And then everything else just falls into that snowball effect, right? And it just keeps going and going and going because you actually have that passion to keep pushing through. So I appreciate you sharing that. And then with you being in coding and Web3, what are some good ways for listeners who are interested in coding and getting into Web3 to break into the industry?
I mean, of course, it always depends on where you come from, right? Have you had some other coding experience before? Do you actually want to be a Web3 developer or want to go into product management like many people do? So it's, of course, depends on the goal, but let's say you just want to get into Web3 development. I think also I usually learn by doing, right? That's just me. I try to think of a crazy idea that creates some kind of tiny flame in myself, like motivation flame, where I say, okay, that's so crazy. Nobody has done that. It's stupid, right? It doesn't make sense. Like a programming language that consists of zeros and ones, which is completely reverse for every tech person here. Then I just try to incrementally try to achieve that with the technologies I need. So in terms of blockchain, like think of a crazy idea and just try to copy paste your way there, fork something. You have to read and study a lot of things, and at the same time you have your first probably really shitty but cool open source project.
So, on that same point, if we look at regular coding versus Web3, should somebody that's looking to get into Web3, do you recommend that they have experience doing regular like website coding before they dive into Web3, or could somebody just go into Web3?
It's less about website coding, but more about understanding general so-called Web2 patterns before, right? Because if you have never coded in your life and you jump into Web3, blockchain looks like the solution for everything. That's wrong, right? Blockchain is a niche technology. You want to use it where it makes sense. That's it. So I really think like unless you anyway your whole life only want to work for hardcore crypto companies that only focus on decentralization, like most even crypto companies don't, then it really makes sense to understand some Web2 patterns as well.
I think that's great because so often you need to know the past in order to redefine the future. We have to know what has come before when you're trying to take something in a new direction. So for listeners today, right, do you mind describing a early professional experience that had a significant impact on your career direction?
I mean, I have a really unconventional, a really unusual path on how I got into coding, right? Nobody ever taught it to me. I had no idea these things exist at that time. I just tried to do stuff, right? When I created my first website, I I had this no code editor like Microsoft Word, basically, like you just write your text. And at some point, I accidentally clicked on a button and saw the HTML code and all that stuff. And I thought, like, what the fuck is this? Deleted it, and all my stuff was gone. And that's how I started, right? And also from there, like my first programming language was Windows Batch, which is not really a programming language. And I coded it without syntax highlighting in a pure plain text editor. And I just tried to do stuff. The moment I switched from the builder mindset, I just wanna build stuff, to okay, it also maybe should make sense, right? It's not as fun anymore, maybe, but that of course from a pure career perspective changed a lot of things for me because, as mentioned, I was never money focused, which is bad for me. um, for a very long time, I just built stuff because it was cool or it was great for my CV or whatever. You know, at some point after my first two startups, I didn't think about making money. How stupid is that? Sorry, like, but yeah, I think that realization or that learning, of course, made a big change.
That's a cool little experience and story that you told there, because each person has their own unique start. And that was very interesting that you actually ended up, identifying the source code and then ended up deleting it as well. But you also, in your history, you have some selling experience, right? So sales. And I know you mentioned that that's taught you some social skills as well. Do you feel that sales and having that experience has helped you in the position that you are in today as being a managing partner?
The sales experience I had before was just selling light bulbs at IKEA, right?
But still, it's like that, you're stepping out, you're talking to people, you're getting that social experience.
Yes, of course, it helped on that front because I was very introverted. But I would say what this helped me a lot was getting out of depression. I think that was the biggest thing because I had to deal with people. And if you are in a depression, you don't want to deal with people. So, but from a pure sales perspective, of course, like understanding that sales is about helping people, making like actually giving them information to make the best decision for themselves. That was a learning I had like very early on. I never try to sell anyone ever. Like I never try to convince anyone. I told them this one is like that, this one is like that. And even if I knew a competitor had something better, I told them, because what does that do? They trust you. That means if they then need something which you have, they will come to you and they will buy more and more often. And that's brand, and that's sales is a bridge of trust in the end. So that was the biggest learning from that time.
Trust is a very big thing. People want to do business with people they trust, and that's where you can get longevity out of it. So, and then I kind of wanted to ask you a swing question. At any given moment in time, how many tabs do you have open on your computer screen while you're working?
I mean, usually definitely like 40, 50, but today just six because I reset my PC yesterday.
Now, are all of those tend to be coding, or do they tend to be a variety of different things?
For marketing, sales, like CRMs, Twitter ads, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, of course.
All of them. No, that's interesting. And then for listeners today, are there any book or resource recommendations that you can share so that they can do continuous learning or get more up to speed with the industry that you're in?
Web3 is a really fast paced world, right? Which means any book you read is like right now, probably 2 years old. So it's great to understand the past and to, if some people are like longer in the industry, that you can have a good conversation with them. So for that, it's very useful. But if you want to understand today, I don't think you should read a book. It's actually, as stupid as that sounds, and I don't really like that myself, but join Twitter spaces, engage in communities, do all that, talk with people in Web3, and you will quickly see like how they think, how they talk, what they're hyped about. You will hear tons of weird terms, deep in whatever, which is one of the current ones, RWAs and whatever. Google them, understand them, learn them, and go from there.
Kind of like just what you were mentioning, right? Just do like you did, just dive in, learn it, understand it, and then you can go from there. At least that's a starting point. So if somebody this day and age is looking to break into the industry, right? They're a young professional. Are there certain things that they can do to better position themselves to get a job in the industry? Like, should they be doing and creating stuff so that they have projects to support themselves when they're trying to get a job? Or should they intern? Like, do you have any advice on that?
In the Web3 space itself, there's like most companies are usually like either not large enough to have interns. If they are, of course, you can intern, you can try to intern, but those are usually then companies that everyone wants to work for. So it will be very difficult to break into that. The most common path I see is for a lot of people try to build something, become a founder, even if it doesn't work out, try to apply for grants. That these things will teach you a lot if you can, of course, because you have to make money in some sense. So I guess you will just have to have another job for a while. That's a path I see with a lot of people. But aside from that, of course, having open source projects. But the easiest, most likely, is again really just engaging with people, connecting with people. I jump onto I think 5 to 10 calls a day with random, seemingly random people in the space. In our case, of course, it's for client acquisition, building relationships, getting affiliates, and these kind of things. But in your case, it could be the same, right? Getting your first job. Like if someone trusts you, likes you, knows that you're like motivated, you might have a chance to get a, let's say, a junior role.
And what are some of the better platforms for those individuals to be a part of to dive into that community?
To connect with people, Twitter, like there are two main ones, right? Twitter is great for hardcore crypto people, like if you really want to get in touch with OGs and all these people, which will be much more difficult, by the way, because Twitter has a lot of scams and people are like more defensive as well, in my opinion. LinkedIn is also great. It's a little bit more professional, of course, but you will find more established entrepreneurs there, more established projects, not also less of these hardcore degens, how people say, that just trade NFTs and these kind of things. So these two are best to connect with people. To in terms of communities, Twitter again, Telegram, and Discord. But it's difficult to connect there with people because there are even more scams and more people try to, you know, so nobody trusts you there.
Thank you for sharing that because I think people that are initially getting into it, they don't know that, but you letting them know that certain platforms are a little bit more scammy versus others, it's just good to know so that they can at least be aware before jumping in. Just to go to the root cause of everything. What ultimately got you into coding?
I mean, the first thing I can remember was like a school friend who has shown me that he created a website. And yeah, I thought, okay, it's actually pretty cool to have something on the internet. I'm just 27, right? But it was still like at that time, I still had my flip phone and this. I feel like super old, but um, it was cool at that time. So that got me in, and just knowing that I can do cool stuff, crazy stuff, and uh, yeah, like there was so much to learn, and I just was fascinated. Like I wanted to build stuff.
What age did you get into that?
13.
Yeah, that's young. That's yeah, at that time. Interesting. So do you think you starting out younger and getting involved in that and doing your own self exploration helped propel you to where you are today versus say somebody that might start out 25?
I mean, time is relative, right? One thing I learned is like even though I on paper I actually had like zero professional experience, like 0 years of experience, which was really difficult when I applied for jobs for that 1 year, for example. um, Although I actually coded for already, what was it? I think for 10 years, like all the time, like non-stop in my free time. So I think it depends like how intense you are. If someone at 25 codes like madness or builds production grade scalable software and has some kind of learns from others, senior people. I never had that, to be honest. I really, the first 10 years of coding, all I did was really just try and error. Like, I think the first 50 projects I did, I never even watched a tutorial, I think, which is in some way maybe even stupid if I think about it. But I really just had like, okay, I want to have a countdown that in school counts down the seconds when we have a break. And my classmates loved me for that. Super stupid, useless, but I did that with Windows Batch, which is definitely a bad programming language for that. I just did these things, and as mentioned, I think the biggest impact for my skill definitely was like having using no syntax highlighting, no IDE, which is both are standard and important. I use them today, of course, but it forced me to really, really, really get attention for detail. Like I see that with my colleagues, which are super senior, highly competent, but when looking for bugs, sounds stupid when I say it myself, but I'm like definitely 5 to 10 times faster because back then in high school I searched for 2 hours because I missed a white space or a semicolon or something like that. And nowadays, or with IDE, it shows you that, right? So you don't develop that attention for detail. Um, and of course, use these tools, right? It's stupid not to use them, but that gave me a certain skill that I think that most people never had to develop.
Yeah, I think it gives you a different edge because to your point, right, you went through time of exploration, right, where there were no tools such as we have today, which make things a lot easier. Whereas you did it, nitty gritty, and you went and you spent the time to research. You reviewed a lot of the code and the content, but I think it also brings about a point of resilience. Like when platforms nowadays tend to give you everything, you don't have time to truly identify where the issues may lie. But by having spent that time exploring, I think your mind adapts into a different way so that if you face a problem, you have different methodologies to attack and resolve that problem, maybe versus other people, right? Because they get put into a certain mindset to like, okay, this is the problem, this is the solution. This is the problem, this is the solution. Whereas in your story that you just told, it's I'll figure it out. no matter what it is, I'll figure it out. Right. And I think that's really cool that you have that element to just keep going and to take things to the next level.
Just for people that are in tech, the tools have been there actually, but I just didn't know them. Like I didn't know about it because no one ever told me. Right? I went to commercial school, so I just had my text editor. I at some point saw, okay, that's how you create a Windows batch file or something like that. That's how you execute it, and from there I tried to build stuff. So it's actually stupid looking backwards, but forcing myself like without assistance, other technical assistance, I just also had to fix bugs that are a couple stacks deeper, right? That most developers don't need to deal with, which is great. Why should you? Right? We are not dealing today with zeros and ones and memory issues and these kind of things, or much less. So it just makes sense to use these tools. So it's kind of just a consequence of my missing experience or not knowing that these tools exist, right? Of course, it helps me, but I wouldn't recommend that because why should you, right? Now with AI tools, should you not use them? It makes you more productive.
What are some apps, plugins, or software that you're currently using to optimize your life or make your life easier, as a managing partner of a company?
I myself, of course, I don't code that much anymore. But of course, for developers, GitHub Copilot is a great tool. It just helps you accelerate your development. Doesn't mean that the code that it spits out is always great. Same for ChatGPT. If you use it for analyzing code, which is great, by the way. For example, yesterday I I discovered a scam and put it in there, and ChatGPT unobfuscated the code, explained what it did, and these kind of things. So these are really, really useful tools. Of course, static analyzers, which Slifer, for example, for smart contracts, which gives you an automated list of potential security issues, which is great because you don't have to figure it out yourself. Of course, less a tool, but unit testing, integration tests, end-to-end tests, like testing frameworks for your code, something I would really recommend. Because when you start out as a developer, you oftentimes it feels like, why should I write tests? Right? I'm just figuring it out on the go. It takes a lot of time. But in the end, if you write something big, it always makes sense. Right? I'm just thinking back a few years. We have built really a huge data analytics application, and there were so many border cases, so many rules of how that data is being analyzed. It was financial data for bonds, stocks, and so on and so forth. And there were oftentimes the weirdest bugs, and without having like many hundreds of automated tests, we literally would need to throw away the whole project and build it from scratch.
Yeah, so those platforms are crucial to help your day-to-day process. So definitely leverage them instead of having to do all of that manual work. So yeah, I think that's great. I like that because there's so much technology this day and age, right? And sometimes people don't know where to start. You mentioned that money is no longer a driver to do what you do. So, what does drive you to do what you do on a day to day basis?
Of course, you need money to survive, right? So it's not my motivator. What drives me? It's I just know that if I don't work hard, I feel like a piece of shit, right? So it's really about that. Like the best days are these days where I wake up at 5 p.m. or 4:30. Even though, to be honest, I don't do that very often. Right? So I'm not like that hyper disciplined like robot that does that all the time. But if I do that, work out at 6 a.m., are back in the office at 8, and then do my stuff, and at 1 p.m. my meetings start, these are the cool days, right? Where I say, okay, I wish I could do that every day. But that drives me, like just having a great day. And of course, if you put a lot of effort into it, you definitely want to, in the long run, doesn't need to be like instant gratification. You just want to see like that effort is being, has an outcome, because otherwise, why would you do anything? Right? So that's kind of, but on the long horizon. So I just want to see that I'm growing in some sense, if that's financially, mindset wise, if I learn something, that's the goal. That's the outcome I want to have along the process. But what about you?
I grew up in South Africa. So being in the US now for almost 16 years, um, I think the main driving force for me is, I've been blessed with the opportunity to have come to the country that I'm in, where there's a lot of opportunity to make something of yourself, and I don't want to not take advantage of that. So I think that's what really drives me. And in specific relation to this podcast, I really just want to help the next generation of folks, because so often there's not enough resources out there for people to turn to, right? Because there is so much information. But I think, to your point, one way to learn is by doing and gaining experience yourself. But then the other option is to learn from those that have traveled before you, so that you don't do the mistakes that they've done in the past, right? And learn from them so that you can get an advantage to move along maybe a little bit more quicker. But now that I'm older and I have a family, I think that also in part is the motivator. So overall, I would say that the motivator fluctuates over time, right? So to your point, maybe you're starting a company motivated you when you were younger, right? The exploration maybe motivated you at one point, and then financially at one point, because that's why we all get into business. But then maybe the passion and the purpose then takes over as the motivator to keep going, because we're helping others in the world, and doing exploration. And then I just wanted to ask, as we round out, like, do you have any other final advice for listeners today that might want to get into the industry that you're in?
Just try to do something cool. Try also help people. That's it. Sounds stupid again, like that basic saying, but that's really the truth.
And it's simple. And sometimes we don't need to overthink it, right? And that's what I think a lot of people do. They try to have these intense goals, the insane work ethic at times. Like, I've got to manage, I got a time block, I got to do X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it is very simple. Do something cool. Prove to yourself that you can do it, and then that snowball will start to just get bigger and bigger, and you'll just end up achieving so much more in your life. I really appreciate your time and sharing all of your knowledge and your stories with us. So thank you.
Thanks again for the invite, mate. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I hope it helps at least one person. And anyway, it was great talking with you.